Hi everyone, Blair Eiseman, Supervisor of Professional Development, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to our first PD podcast here in South Brunswick titled, Let's Just Hit Record. The podcast has the same theme as our newsletter, small bits of PD to grab and go. There'll be a few episodes this summer on a variety of topics with more to come in the fall. The episodes will be short, informative, and conversational. We're going to sit around and talk and just hit record and see what comes of it. You could listen to the podcast from anywhere while doing anything, truly at your convenience. Our first episode is Bibliotherapy Part 1. I'm joined by Lisa Manganello and Kate Hanasowski, both library media specialists from the high school. I also have Kyle Nemes, middle school science, and some familiar voices from around the district. In this episode, we're going to share some really great book recommendations to kick off your summer reading. I'm going to turn it over to Kate, who will get us started. But Kate, before we jump into the book recommendations, what is bibliotherapy and why is it beneficial?
Bibliotherapy is simply using literature to help people cope with emotional problems, mental health issues, or any changes or trauma a person experiences in their lives. Let's face it, this pandemic has been traumatic for everyone in different ways. We can harness the power of books to help support our own social, emotional, and mental well being. Books and stories are powerful, whether you use them as an escape or for reflection.
Bibliotherapy can also be about finding your people and the people who like to read books that are similar to you or that you can get recommendations from. Project Lit is a phenomenal organization that pushes students and adults alike to read diverse titles. And it's brought some of our district teachers together because we've shared books with each other over the past few years. Allison Dubois, who's up next, and I like to swap books, and I'm excited to hear what she would recommend for our next read.
My inclination is to recommend all books Project Lit. They have middle grade and young adult, huge variety of topics, subjects, ethnicities, race, situation, identity, just fabulous set of reading. So look for Project Lit, and shout out to Mark Riccardi, Sarah Basquiano, Kim Zito, Kim Bino for turning me on to this expansive collection. But by way of recommendation, I'll go with the last book that I've read that comes under this Project Lit umbrella. It sounds better in my head when I pronounce these Spanish words, but the title of the book is Furia, F-U-R-I-A. The author is Yamil Said Mendez. Excellent book about a young woman coming into her own in a society that doesn't always agree with where she's trying to go. Hope you pick it up or anything from Project Lit and learn and enjoy.
I am a huge Project Lit fan. I actually think that's really all I've been reading for a while now. Being that they're young adult books, they're shorter, so you could get through them quicker. But more importantly, I think that they help me stay current and informed and connected to our students. If you're looking for a Project Lit title, you can do a quick Google search of Project Lit and you'll find book lists from each year since Project Lit started. These titles are so important. They spark conversations, they build this community of belonging, and they allow students to see themselves in books in a positive light. I don't think I've read a Project Lit title that I haven't loved, so it's very hard for me to pick just one. So I think I'm going to highlight I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter by Erica Sanchez. The main character, Julia, is trying to live up to this impossible ideal. Her parents want her to be just like her older sister. The story is about her trying to prove who she isn't, and along the way, figuring out who she is, while also realizing that our flaws are really what makes us who we are. I remember reading a review that described the book as part mystery, part love story, part inner quest. It's truly a great story, rich with culture. So I hope you maybe check that one out.
It was really hard for me to just pick one project lit title that I wanted to share because so many of them have left an impact on me and were so memorable. One of my absolute favorites, which is an LGBT pick, is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin O'Leary Signs. I think about this story all the time, even months after reading it. Aristotle is an angry teen with a brother in prison, and he struggles to understand why his family doesn't speak of him anymore. Dante, on the other hand, is an eccentric know-it-all who has an extremely close-knit relationship with his academic parents. Their friendship is such a lovely thing to watch ebb and flow, while at the same time they grow as individuals. You can't help but fall in love with them and root for them along the way. This is definitely a coming-of-age story. It's mixed with romance, it's mixed with family struggles, mixed with self-discovery, and is told in such a way that makes you not want to put this one down. There's also a sequel, 7 years in the making. It's called Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World, and I'm really excited for it to come out. It's coming out in October of 2021, and I'm sure it will also be on a Project Lit book list.
I love Project Lit books, but some of my favorites are The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. Now, that's actually what I would call a classic at this point. That's been out for a few years. But what I love is Angie Thomas followed it with Concrete Rose, which is her most recent release. And that's the story of Maverick Carter, who was Star's father in The Hate You Give. And he's a minor character in The Hate You Give, but an important character. And she's taking his story and looking back to when Maverick was 17 and how his life started out, and really giving you a perspective on the characters in The Hate You Give. So if you loved that book, you will love Concrete Rose. Now, same thing about the next two. Dear Martin, by Nick Stone. I love Nick Stone's writing. I love her characters. I just think she writes a brilliant story and she crafts these characters that make you fall in love with them. And Justice McAllister from Dear Martin is like my favorite character ever. But in that story, Justice is an honors kid bound for Yale in the fall when he's arrested by the police due to a misunderstanding. And because he's Black, he's held in custody overnight. And he has to come to terms with the fact that regardless of how good a kid he is, he's going to be judged by the color of his skin. And what does that mean? So he begins to write a series of letters to Martin Luther King and kind of reflects on the experiences he's having to try to put them together and make sense of them. Dear Justice, which follows Dear Martin, and it's not a series necessarily, but the characters do overlap between the two books. Nick Stone brilliantly takes one of the minor characters in Dear Martin and gives him a voice of his own and lets him write letters to Justice this time to kind of process what's happening to him when he finds himself in jail at a very young age. So all four of these books are fantastic reads, and they're such a great path to put yourself on if you're looking for good books.
Lisa, good choices. You know what? You actually took two of my favorite ones, Hate You Give and Dear Martin. So I love those books for Project Lit. I'm also going to throw out On the Come Up, also by Angie Thomas, great book, and The 57 Bus, which was good, true story, but just kind of hard and heavy, but also really, really good for me to read. So I definitely recommend that one as well. Next up, we have a really great conversation I had with Sandy Bain, sixth grade teacher over at Crossroads South. She actually has two books that she's recommending, one nonfiction, one fiction. And what I like about them is on the surface, they seem very different. One is about a man on death row, a true story, who's found Buddhism to help him, I guess, find some peace. And then the other one is about this woman who is basically in a library and reads different books. And ultimately, each book is kind of a flashback to a part of her life that she could have lived. So they seem very different, but ultimately at the end, I kind of love them because they're both about kind of finding peace, which I think is incredibly important. So without further ado, I turn it over to Sandy.
Oh, thank you, Kyle. It's a pleasure to be here.
What you got?
All right. The first book I have for you is called The Buddhist on Death Row by David Sheff. And I just finished this weekend. This was recommended to me by my friend Joanne. And it's about a man named Jarvis Masters. And Jarvis is pretty typical of kids we think of that grow up in the hood. You know, mom's on crack. He's surrounded by violence. He's living in poverty. And one thing goes from bad to worse in his life, and he winds up in jail. While he's in jail, he doesn't commit a murder of a guard, but it's kind of pinned on him. And so now he's on death row. And it's about his struggle on death row, but specifically how he just happens to cross paths with a Buddhist person who's involved with prison reform and has been visiting him. And he starts to dabble in Buddhism and meditation, and how he uses that to help with the trauma of being in a self-contained room, being on death row. And then he takes that understanding and journey that he's on with these Buddhist principles and starts to share them with other inmates on the block. So I don't want to give too much more away than that, but it is nonfiction, and it's just kind of a fascinating look at how do you handle the worst situation you could ever be in? How do you keep yourself from going crazy? And for him, it was meditation and looking at a Buddhist way of approaching his situation.
I was going to ask you, so this is nonfiction, true story.
Yeah.
So for me, who is not on death row, what do you think I would get out of the book? Would it be just I would learn some Buddhist principles so I could be more at peace with my own life and challenges, or have empathy for what did you get from it? I guess?
Yeah. Well, at the basis of Buddhism is this idea that everybody suffers. And so how do we deal with our own suffering? And then more importantly, how do we help others deal with their suffering? How do we show compassion? How do we help others pull themselves out of the dregs? And I guess that's really the lesson that I took away from this, is we all think that our situation is horrible and, I'm going through this thing and, nobody suffers more than me, but truly there are people that are. And how do you take your own suffering and turn it around for the good of the people around you?
All right, cool.
That's what I would take from it.
I'm in. I'm sold.
Yeah.
All right, and you have a fiction book for us, right?
Yeah. The fiction book is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. And this one caught my attention because, of course, I'm a reader and it has the word library in the title, so I had to check it out. But it's about a woman named Nora, and she finds herself in that space of, I'm dead, but I'm not dead yet.
Okay.
And while she's in this in-between space, she finds herself at a library, and her old social studies teacher, I think it was, is the librarian. And the books just go on forever and ever and ever. And this old librarian friend of hers tells her that the library is full of all the paths that she didn't take in her life. And so since she's in this in-between space, she can explore these books and see, did you live your best life? Or maybe there was a way that you should have gone and it would have been a better life for you. So, the whole book is it's almost like Groundhog Day. You wake up again, but you're in a different spot this time. What would have happened if I hadn't broke up with my boyfriend in high school and we were still together? What would have happened if I had taken the job with Xerox instead of with more business forms? So in this way, the book kind of makes you reflect on your own life decisions and, what would have happened if I had done this? And am I living my best decision?
All right. I mean, it sounds cool. I could also see it being like anxiety provoking because I feel like we all have those thoughts already, right? Of what have I did? So does that magnify some of those thoughts you already have? Of, I should have done this or I should have done that, or is the idea that you're at peace kind of with whatever decisions you ultimately make? So
not to give too much away, but in her situation, as she relives these different alternatives, she's discovering that, that wouldn't have been a good choice if I had married Dan instead of marrying the man that I married, So in a way, it's a little more affirming than terrifying.
Can I just tell you that The Midnight Library has been recommended to me so many times in the past week or two that I'm not at all surprised to hear it recommended here as well. I think anyone that picks up this book will be able to connect or relate in some way. It's definitely on my list, so thank you, Sandy, for sharing. And somehow we have already come to the end of Bibliotherapy Part 1. You could probably guess from the title that a Part 2 is on its way with some nonfiction reads, as well as some historical fiction, fantasy, and contemporary issues. If you have a book recommendation you'd like to share for our next episode, you can hop onto our Flipgrid at tinyurl.com/SBSD Bibliotherapy to record your audio. Again, that's tinyurl.com/SBSD Bibliotherapy. A big thank you to Lisa, Kate, and Kyle for their book recommendations. but more importantly, for all of their work behind the scenes to create this episode with me. Thank you to Allison and Sandy for their book picks, and to you for tuning in to Let's Just Hit Record. Stay tuned for future episodes, and happy summer reading.